Welcome to the Rally to Defend Our Health. Thank you all for joining us. And I'm so happy to be here tonight. I report at News Center Maine, which is the NBC affiliate in Portland. I report on the issues that Defend Our Health works on. Tonight, we will all learn more about safe food, safe drinking water, and safe products. And we also want to send out a thanks to all of our rally sponsors with special recognition to Trillium Asset Management, a corporate partner of Defend Our Health. And we'll be using the chat function to provide additional information for you. So please go to the bottom of your Zoom screen now and press the chat button. You will open that column on the right side and go to the bottom and switch that blue bubble to all panelists and attendees so we can chat with you. Feel free to ask questions in the chat, and if you don't hear them answered tonight, Defend Our Health staff will follow up with you to make sure you get answers. And now let's meet the staff team.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Mike Beliveau, Executive Director of Defend Our Health. I founded the Environmental Health Strategy Center to halt the chemical crisis that threatens our health and to end the unjust burden on low-wealth families and people of color. Using science, strategy, and people power, we've made tremendous progress in Maine and nationally, but new threats loom large, from the forever chemicals in our food and water to the growing threat to our health and climate from plastic pollution. That's why we've changed our name to Defend Our Health. We're doubling down on the fight for environmental health and justice for all. And now our team would like to share a few thoughts on what Defend Our Health means to them.
Hi, my name is Sergio Kowick and I'm the organizer at Defend Our Health. I work at Defend Our Health because I strongly believe that everybody deserves access to safe drinking water and food. And I think that it's going to take all of us working together to make sure that people are not exposed to toxic chemicals.
I'm Elise Tipton, Director of Advancement. We need to defend our health, to protect our children and our grandchildren. Don't we owe them that?
I'm Brandon, National Campaign Director at Defend Our Health. We work to make sure everyday household products don't expose us to toxic chemicals.
Hello, I'm Bronley Lorman, and I'm very excited to be part of the dynamic team of Defend Our Health. Cleaning up toxins from the environment and making companies accountable is very important to me as the parent of 2 young daughters.
Hey folks, this is Taylor Moore, Communications Director at Defend Our Health. Defend Our Health represents to me utilizing storytelling and strategy to ensure that we are protecting the health of everybody.
Hey, I'm Sarah Woodbury and I'm the Director of Advocacy for Defend Our Health. To me, Defend Our Health means creating equitable policies that protect all people from toxic chemicals, allowing communities to thrive.
Hey, it's Patrick McRoy, Deputy Director at Defend Our Health. To me, defending our health is creating systems to ensure both government and industry protect our families from toxic chemicals.
Hi, I'm Sean Hunt. I'm the Operations Manager at Defend Our Health. It's my job to keep things moving, so now that we're all here, let's do this.
Good to see you, team. We're rooting for you. Now, let's meet an American hero who has served the public in many roles, including for 10 years as the first woman to direct the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. She is this year's recipient of Defend Our Health Frank Hatch Environmental Health Leadership Award. Frank's influence as a philanthropist helped launch Defend Our Health. We're honored to welcome Dr. Linda Birnbaum.
Well, thank you very much, Vivien. I'm really pleased to be here for multiple reasons, not including that I have some family in the area who I believe are on the line, and that's a special treat. What I'd really like to do is just very, very quickly tell you a little bit about kind of how I got to do what I've done. And I've really had more than 40 years now of studying environmental exposures. I joined NIEHS as a tenure track scientist. Actually, now it's been 41 years ago, and spent 10 years there. And a lot of the work that I did at that point, if anyone told me I'd still be interested in that, I would probably not have believed them, because in fact, you think that things change. But some of the things I worked with in those first 10 years were TCDD, and I know that there have been lots of interest, not only in TCDD, but PCBs in Maine and the contamination they brought. Solvents like benzene, which are highly toxic, and I think you know is leukemogenic, and also arsenic, which is a big issue in Maine because of much of it naturally occurring in your drinking water supplies. After about 10 years at NIH, I was recruited away to run EPA's largest health research division. And I should state right off the top that I've never been a regulator or a policymaker directly. I've always been conducting and providing scientific leadership for research efforts. But I became very interested in around actually right around 2000 in the whole issues of flame retardants, which hit me like a ton of bricks, because all of a sudden we were finding flame retardants everywhere in the environment and in people. And frankly, they had really been totally under the radar screen and people weren't interested. Now, many of the flame retardants were like some of the dioxins and the PCBs and being highly persistent and bioaccumulative compounds. So, and much of the exposure came from house dust and the food that we ate. I also became interested around that time in endocrine disrupting chemicals. And I think part of my interest was driven from my fact that dioxin never meant an endocrine system that it didn't want to disrupt. And I think we now are understanding that endocrine disruption chemicals are all around us. In adults, they maintain our basic homeostasis, who we are, but during development, they are absolutely essential. And if you interfere with their action during development, you are going to have problems in development. Development is not reversible. It's a one-way street. I think some of the other things that I've placed emphasis on for more than the last 20 years is the issue of key windows of susceptibility. In other words, development, pregnancy, our infant childhood. These are really key times in our life when we're likely to be more susceptible to environmental kind of toxicants. But I think that we also understand that there are windows of susceptibility other than just time in our life. There are for our inherent genetic susceptibility, which varies dramatically between us. And then issues like environmental justice and the fact, if many of you I know all have heard about Flint, Michigan, and that was unfortunately a classic example of environmental injustice. And I think that we really need to pay special attention to our low-income communities and communities of color. Another thing that has really hit me is that mixtures are the reality. None of us are ever exposed to one kind of chemical or one kind of environmental stressor at a time. It's always a mixture, and we need to begin, and we still haven't been very successful at ways to look at more the totality of the exposure. And there's a whole new approach called the exposome, which is beginning to try to do that. But right now, some of my most focused, some of my own personal research, as well as things that I'm working on, are PFAS, which are chemicals I know that in your neighborhood you're concerned about. You know that cattle have been contaminated by biosolids that have been spread on the field. I could tell you that there's lots of other things you should be concerned about in biosolids. It's not just the PFAS. There are metals, there are flame retardants, and a raft of things. But somehow PFAS has at least gotten the attention of people. And then we know as well, for example, that our PFAS exposure is not just from the biosolids and that kind of food. We also find it can be a major contaminant in our drinking water. And even if we don't know why the water is contaminated often, and then it also is a contaminant in our food. So fish that are swimming in those contaminated waters will be contaminated. But a major source of contamination in the food that we eat is food packaging materials. There are lots of other sources, but I think some of those are absolutely the major ones. I think that what I've learned is that if you want to do environmental health work, you absolutely must work with the groups and the communities that are impacted. They know what their problems are. They want to and really have the right to be critical in the work that choosing your topic, how you do it, and letting them share in the process. You really can't do it. And I'm a big believer in community-based participatory research and citizen science. So I was asked to talk very quickly about issues of regulation. And all I'm going to say is that we have the best regulatory system money can buy. And if that sounds cynical, I think it is. In order to move the regulatory agenda, what we really need is community action, advocacy, and marketplace attention. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Birnbaum. And let's talk for a few minutes more. I think what you just set up, you set up the next question. Looking ahead at the new presidential administration, how hopeful are you that we'll see the EPA and other agencies start to make chemical safety policies stronger?
I'm optimistic that things will improve compared to the way that they have been for the past couple of years. And under the current leadership at EPA, lots of regulations are being reversed, things are being blocked and so on. I don't think that will happen. But frankly, I think that some of our problems with environmental regulation are the laws that, for example, EPA or the Consumer Product Safety Commission, or even parts of FDA dealing with food contaminants have to work with. The assumption is made of innocent till proven guilty, and that may be fine in a jury trial. I'm not sure it's fine with exposure to different kinds of environmental chemicals. And we really need to have requirements for testing of compounds before they're introduced to the marketplace.
Right, yes. Why is the work of Defend Our Health and its colleague organizations nationwide so important?
Well, I think a great question, Vivien, but I think I kind of alluded to it. I think the way to get change in the marketplace is for advocacy groups and community groups to raise the banner, to inform others. I think communication is a huge issue and letting people know there's a problem, and coming up and working with people to find out about ways to focus on the solution in some ways rather than the problem. You know, one of the situations we face repeatedly with environmental regulations and environmental health is that often the populations who are the most impacted by pollution, like people at the fence line communities and some of our lower income and communities of color, they depend on those very industries for their livelihood. And so we have to change the dialogue and work to bring in, for example, good jobs, clean jobs, safe jobs, so that you're not making people choose between their income and their health.
Right, definitely. And when it comes to protecting ourselves and our families from the harms of toxic chemical exposure, what can people do individually?
Well, there are certain things you can do. I think we all listen to the air pollution advisories and we're told that it's a really bad air day and you shouldn't exercise outside. I think many of us listen to that. There are certain things we can do. For example, with PFAS, we know, for example, that they've been on certain kinds of dental floss. We know that they're on, for example, your certain Teflon pots. And I'll just tell you, if you go to this, you say, I don't want Teflon pots, I'm getting rid of them. And you go to your local store and you're looking for some nonstick pans and there's a big sign, PFOA free, that should be your clue. It's got other PFAS in it. Just like when you go and you buy your new water bottle and it says BPA free, it's got some other BPA relative in there. So I think the more information we have, information is power. And I think that we can use that information to make decisions.
Definitely. Thank you so much again, Linda. Thank you so much for being with us tonight and for all the work you've done to protect children and their families from toxic harm.
Thank you.
And now let's focus on some issues that affect our drinking water. For some of you, this dairy farmer's story may be familiar.
Our nightmare began November 2nd, 2016. We received a letter from Kennebec Water telling us that they thought that there might be a problem with PFAS in the aquifer. My name is Fred Stone. I am a dairy farmer in Arundel, Maine, and this is a third generation dairy farm. Some of our cow families go back over 40 years. I never really realized that PFAS existed.
Now that was a brief clip of Fred Stone, who Defend Our Health has worked closely with and whose story I'm very proud to help bring to light. Now, since Fred's story began receiving national attention last year, additional PFAS contamination has been discovered in Maine and across the country. Defend Our Health Deputy Director Patrick McCroy is here to tell us more.
Yeah, that's right, Vivien. Sadly, we recently learned about a second dairy farm here in Maine that has also been ruined by these forever chemicals. Not only was its milk contaminated at record high levels, but the land is so polluted that it appears to be contaminating neighboring properties' drinking water wells.
Now, Patrick, what should government be doing to protect people?
Well, I'm kind of beginning to feel like a broken record on that because we've really been saying and calling for the same thing since we first learned about Fred Stone's story over 2 years ago. We need to stop the spread of contaminated sludge on farmland. We need to test farmland that receives sludge as well as the products from those farms. And we need to, most importantly, turn off the tap of toxic PFAS that's still entering our environment. Now, Maine has made some progress. We've reduced the amount of sludge that we have applied to land over the last year, and we've made progress in turning off the tap. Last year, we worked with the legislature to ban PFAS from food packaging. But the state has still identified more than 500 farms that have received sludge in the past and has yet to test them or their products. And we still have a long way to go before we actually turn off the tap completely. Nationally, lessons from Maine have been learned and heard a little bit by other states. Other states have begun testing some of their wastewater and sludge for PFAS. And perhaps most importantly, New York very recently copied Maine and banned PFAS from food packaging. But on a federal level, we're still not seeing much action. Federal agencies have done very little to address this crisis. And it's also important to note that neither state nor federal officials have done much of anything to help farmers like Fred who have lost their livelihood because of PFAS. There's a lot of work that we need to do, all of us together, to continue to fight the toxic chemicals and the PFAS that have ruined these farms and are ruining our health.
Thank you, Patrick. Now I want to turn to Defend Our Health Safe Drinking Water campaign. It has a big goal to ensure safe drinking water for more than 40 million rural Americans who drink from household wells. And it makes sense that the campaign started in Maine because Maine has the highest percentage of people in the country who drink well water. And here's a fact you may find startling. Across America, household wells are not regulated for safety. Defend Our Health organizer Sergio Cajeke can tell us more about why that's dangerous.
Thank you, Vivien. It is really dangerous that in rural communities across the country, people get no help protecting their household wells. We know that naturally occurring arsenic and other contaminants in well water can harm children and their families. This is a serious health problem because science shows that arsenic is clearly linked to a loss of IQ in children and to bladder cancer and other types of cancer. But so many people don't know they should test their well water, and we are trying to change that. In the summer, one way we get the word out about testing is through our internship program. The program teaches our interns the techniques of grassroots organizing and advocacy. One of our summer 2020 interns is with us this evening, so I want to welcome Caroline.
Thank you, Sergio. Good evening, everyone. My name is Caroline Kurtz, and I'm a fourth-year undergraduate student studying public health at UC Berkeley. I'm going to give you a brief overview of what we accomplished this past summer during our internship. So we started in early June and began working on the Safe Drinking Water campaign, conducting outreach and drafting materials to conduct outreach with. We also assisted with legislation research and even helped to create materials for high school teachers wishing to become more involved with teaching their students how to become advocates for environmental justice issues. As the summer went on, we called supporters and built meaningful connections, which ended up inspiring several safe drinking water testing projects across communities in Maine. As the end of the summer approached, we pivoted and began working on an investigation of toxic sludge spreading on farmlands in Maine to understand better the extent of PFAS contamination across the state. Our work covered many avenues of advocacy, outreach, and policy action, which was so exciting to be a part of. Environmental justice and advocacy work are important to me because I believe that everyone should have the right to inhabit a clean and safe environment regardless of socioeconomic status. Marginalized communities should not be exposed to toxic substances because they cannot afford to protect themselves from contaminants such as PFAS, arsenic, or phthalates. Such issues demand action, and I, along with many others, want to demand our legislators to push for change and increase protections for communities living with risky exposures to chemicals they did not produce. One of the many highlights this summer was our work researching toxic spills on farmlands across Maine. This project really gave me an in-depth look at how research, action, and advocacy can push for positive change, coming full circle and using what we learned from our efforts to push for legislative change. I think the main takeaway I had from my experience with Defend Our Health would really be that my work during my summer internship helped me to see the diverse practices involved with public health and environmental justice, specifically how the interactions of research, data, policy, community organizing, and legislative action result in definitive changes to the current practice of environmental justice and law. I really learned from this experience how to hone my skills as both a student in public health and in my role as an advocate, researcher, and organizer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sergio and Caroline. And now it's time for all of you to take a quiz. 2 questions are up on your screen. Defend Our Health Director, Elise Tipton, will share them with you.
Okay, hi everybody. I hope you liked our Jeopardy music. We're going to give you a few more minutes, well, seconds actually, to answer the poll. See how the answers are coming in. Yeah, it looks like I think you've gotten them all down. All right, so I'm going to roll and tell you what the answers are. Turns out on question 1, lots of you got it right. The answer is B, 2015. That's the year that we won this victory with the Mind the Store campaign. And I'll add that 2 years later, Defend Our Health won a law in Maine that bans flame retardants from upholstered furniture. It's an unprecedented state law and a model for other states. And to win it, we had to work with lots of different groups of stakeholders, including professional firefighters. Among firefighters, cancer is the #1 cause of death. So when you think about that, I think you can understand that firefighters are exposed often, a lot, to the poisons and the toxics that are released when buildings and contents burn. All right, question 2. Again, let me just see how smart all y'all are. Oh my gosh, you're way too smart. Most of you have gotten the right answer. It's C. We would save 44 million tons of greenhouse gases. And that's one of the reasons why Defend Our Health is working to eliminate plastic pollution and to slow climate change. For everything that we're working on, we're very grateful for your support and partnership. Among our guests tonight are donors and partners who work with us on a professional level, and we couldn't do it without you. So before we head on into the home stretch of the rally, I'm asking you to please help with a little fundraising. We've made it easy for you. You just need to use the chat to make a gift pledge. You write your full name and the amount of your pledge, please, and we can follow up with you. You also have the opportunity to go to the donate page of our website now or anytime, 24/7, 7 days a week. The donate page is defendourhealth.org/donate. And I think you'll also find in the chat that there's a link directly there. I see some chats are some pledges are coming in. Be great to see some more. Oh, nice. Oh yeah, some familiar names coming across. Thank you so much. You know, Working for Defend Our Health, I have met moms who feel so guilty that unknowingly they've been giving their kids unsafe drinking water for years. And when our state legislature voted to ban awful, useless, toxic flame retardants, I was in the House gallery sitting next to the widow of a firefighter who died from cancer. And she cried when that vote came. So those are just some of the people that we're working for and who you can work for too. We literally cannot do our job without your support. Please make a gift, please make a pledge. You'll support the work that we've talked about already and the work ahead, because we're about to talk about getting toxic chemicals out of the food that we're feeding America's children. So please make a pledge before the rally ends. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Elise. And now let's talk about safe food. Dr. Leonardo Trascende serves in multiple director, teaching, and research positions at New York University. He is recognized as a leading voice across the country in public health policy. Dr. Trascende is also the 2018 winner of the Defend Our Health's Betty Kettle Outstanding Health Professional Award. It's named for an amazing registered nurse who lent her considerable energy to our work. Last year, Dr. Trascende made a memorable briefing for members of the Maine legislature on why toxic chemicals don't belong in our food. And he's helped convince Maine lawmakers to pass a first in the nation law that bans both PFAS and phthalates in food packaging. Dr. Trascende, can you describe some of the known harms associated with hormone disrupting chemicals found in our food?
Well, we're barely scratching the surface of what we know about endocrine disrupting chemicals because, as Dr. Birnbaum already described, we don't routinely test chemicals for their safety, let alone for effects on hormones in our bodies that underlie so many basic molecular functions, from maintaining healthy body temperature, sugar, metabolism, salt, even sex. We know so far of about 1,000 chemicals. The evidence is strongest for flame retardants used in electronics and furniture, phthalates used in plastics, personal care products, and food packaging, bisphenols used in aluminum can linings and thermal paper receipts, pesticides used in agriculture, and PFAS, which are used in nonstick cooking materials, as well as oil and water resistant clothing. The evidence is strongest for the effects of developing brains of young children. We now have countless studies documenting the effects of flame retardants and pesticides contributing to cognitive dysfunctions and potentially even autism and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We also know about 50 or so chemicals that literally make us fatter. So the prototype obesogen, if you will, chemical that literally makes us obese, is bisphenol A or BPA. BPA makes fat cells bigger, disrupts the function of a protein that protects the heart called adiponectin, and is a synthetic estrogen, so can have sex-specific effects on body mass. Just to go back to PFAS for a second, PFAS in one study has actually reversed weight loss in adults who worked hard to maintain a healthy diet and good physical activity, losing weight that way. And they did it by slowing down the body's thermostat the wrong way. You can imagine a cold Maine winter day and thinking about the thermostat going the wrong way. And instead of burning off fat, the body responds to calories by putting that back into fat as opposed to muscle or bone. And those are the many and sundry effects that we know that hormone disrupting chemicals can have on our health. They literally make us sicker, fatter, and these diseases cost us all as a society what little we know. One study we did back in 2016 found that endocrine disrupting chemicals cost the US $340 billion a year. That's 2.3% of our gross domestic product. And yet that was based on less than 5% of known endocrine disruptors, a subset of diseases due to those few chemicals, and a subset of the costs due to the few diseases due to the few chemicals. So literally we're talking about an underestimate of an underestimate of an underestimate, yet we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars each year.
Wow. So tell me, why are science-based advocacy and marketplace pressure important tools for making progress for public health?
Well, we talk about the power of science, and that's still true even to this day with all the misinformation that's out there. But the real power is in the power of the pocketbook or the wallet, in that companies, time and again, as we saw through that quiz, respond to consumer activism and change. Think back all the way to BPA-free baby bottles and sippy cups. I'm not saying BPA-free was splendid as an intervention. We now have bisphenol S and a host of other chemical whack-a-moles, if you will, bad replacements of BPA. But back in 2008, there was much less science than there was now. And yet a little bit of media awareness made the companies run literally to the FDA after they had changed their composition of these baby bottles and forced the FDA to institute a ban to reassure the public. That's again the kind of power that can be the change we seek. It took a study of just 5 buffet-style food packages to be identified as having PFAS rather, to literally drive 2 major supermarket chains to get rid of their stock of these buffet-style food packages and replace them with PFAS. And in the era of social media with Twitter and Facebook, you saw that in real time. And that has not only multiplied, it's accelerated the change we seek.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Transende. Now, we've heard how important it is to eliminate the ways we're exposed to toxic chemicals through food. So let's hear from Defend Our Health National Campaign Director, Brandon Moore, about the National Toxic Free Food Campaign.
Thanks, Vivien. It's truly an honor to coordinate the Toxic Free Food Campaign with our partners across the country. What our campaign does is we work to improve children's health and reduce racial disparities by reducing exposure to food contact chemicals, some of the chemicals that Dr. Transende just described, such as phthalates. We do that by trying to give a voice to groups most threatened by toxic chemicals across our food supply chain, including children, parents, people of color, caregivers, and others.
Well, Brandon, how do toxic chemicals get into our food?
That's a loaded question. It's in a variety of ways. They escape from food processing equipment, from the packaging, from the serviceware, and ultimately into our food and everyday household products.
Can you tell us about some of the campaign highlights?
Yeah, of course. I think hopefully many of you on this call may remember when we launched our campaign 3 years ago with our study shedding light on toxic chemicals in boxed mac and cheese. That news literally went all over the world, and hundreds of thousands of people signed a petition to get phthalate chemicals out of mac and cheese. A public project like that helps us convince brands to talk with us so we can try and compel them to make healthy changes. In fact, we have some big news on that front early next year, but I can't say more now. I can say that we are continuing with projects that involve consumers directly to increase their awareness and allow them to put the pressure on brands.
Can you give us an example of that kind of project?
I can. Most recently, we identified glass bottle beverage cap liners as the next place to drive toxic chemicals out of our food supply. So we did a citizen science project where we had people from all over the country and Canada sent us over 300 caps that we tested for phthalates. Now we've begun to reach out to the brands that tested positive. We'll be releasing a public report early next year where we'll be naming and celebrating the industry leaders while naming and shaming the industry laggards. Our campaign will continue to give consumers ways to make their voices heard for safe food.
Wow, looking forward to that report, Brandon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And as we've seen tonight, Defend Our Health works with scientists, doctors, consumers, and industry leaders. And especially because federal regulation is failing to protect our health from toxic chemicals, health protective state laws become models for other states. Defend Our Health Director of Advocacy, Sarah Woodbury, will help us pay tribute to one state leader.
Thank you so much, Vivien. Tonight, we are honoring former Representative Henry Ingwerson with our 2020 Legislative Leadership Award. While in office, Henry led the way on legislation to make it easier for those impacted by PFAS contamination to go after those responsible for the toxic chemicals. Unfortunately, due to COVID, the bill didn't make it to a full vote, but will be taken up again in the next legislative session. In 2019, Henry worked with Representative Jessica Fay, who we honored last year, and I believe who is listening in this evening, to help pass legislation that phased out the use of PFAS and phthalates in food packaging. He's a tireless advocate for those impacted by PFAS contamination, including his constituent Fred Stone, and cares deeply about protecting Mainers from toxic chemicals. We are honored to present him with our 2020 Legislative Leadership Award. And so I will turn it over to Representative Henry Ingwerson.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah. And I am so honored and I'm very humbled to receive this award. And there's others out there all over Maine and all over the nation who've really worked for so much longer and so much harder than I have. So I'm just super excited and humbled. 2 weeks after I was elected in 2018, my neighbor Ginny across the road said, "You got to go meet Fred. You got to talk to him." And so I walked a mile down the road to Fred's farm, which I had never actually spoken to Fred and Laura, and I sat and listened to his very alarming and heartbreaking story. And so my journey with PFAS in our community in Maine got started then. And I simply stepped up and took hold of trying to solve this problem because it is literally destroying Fred's livelihood and the health of his whole family. But also because I believe everyone has a right to clean water, clean air, and healthy food to eat. Through Fred, I met Patrick, I met Sarah and Mike from Defend Our Health and worked with them on how we could help Fred and others in Maine who would and who will be impacted by PFAS. In my very short 2 years in the Maine legislature, I've learned so much from Defend Our Health about how to navigate the very complex territory between, on one hand, a constituent's very real problem and getting to legislation that actually will make a difference in the life and in the lives of other Mainers. Here's just a couple things that Defend Our Health has done as a policy partner with me. And I've learned so very much, as I've said. They researched and informed on the complicated issue of PFAS. They partnered, connected with other legislators, interest groups, citizens, scientists, and other experts in developing good policy. And really importantly, they've kept this complex issue of PFAS focused so that we could get to some successful legislation, and organized effective community hearings, including gathering interested parties and involving the media. So that's just a little bit of what they've done. In all I've done and all we do here, relationships are key. They what really matter. So the relationship I've done and had with Defenders of Health is vital to any success I've had as a policymaker regarding PFAS. We need to keep electing good legislators who will listen and work with constituents on these issues, but we also need to keep doing whatever we can to make sure Defenders of Health is there for us in Maine and into the future. So thank you very much.
I just wanted to ask you a real quick question. What should people in Maine urge their legislators to do next session to help those affected by contamination from these toxic chemicals?
Well, I could go on for quite a while on that, but I think there's some definite priorities. First, I think we need to do an immediate reboot of my old bill there from last summer, which introduced in the 129th, and it simply updates Maine statute to allow people impacted by PFAS contamination to seek damages from the manufacturer for up to 6 years from the discovery of harm. We got this bill through Judiciary Committee in July, but it was interrupted by COVID, and I hope it will be introduced, and I feel like it probably will be introduced in the 130th. Second, we really need a bill that will require companies to disclose the use of PFAS in any consumer products. It'll also require the phase out of any non-essential use of PFAS in consumer products, essential, helping to turn off the tap and get the harmful chemicals out of the products we use every day. Third, we need a bill that will designate PFAS as a hazardous substance, allowing the state to access funding for cleanup. And finally, and I think this is probably very important, and Patrick has already mentioned it, We need testing of all sites in Maine where sludge spreading has occurred. We know where these sites are, records have been kept, and the people of Maine, they really need to know where this contamination exists. As we know now from Arundel and now Fairfield, where land contamination has occurred, we also have contaminated food products and contaminated drinking water. So it's got to answer the most common question we get as legislators. Am I safe? Are my kids safe? Is there PFAS in my water? This testing needs to happen in order to answer those questions.
Thank you very much, Henry. Now, before we wrap everything up with Mike Beliveau, of course, the Executive Director of Defend Our Health, we wanted to go back to Dr. Linda Birnbaum and ask her a couple more questions. Linda, with the upcoming changes in the administration, do you feel there may be more timely action with respect to PFAS in the areas of liability, cleanup, CERCLA, hazardous material designation, and the regulatory implications for public drinking water? That's a loaded question.
The simple answer is yes. I think there will be some movement. My understanding is that there were actually things that were planned that could not be done under this administration. I think that the fastest thing that and maybe the most effective initial response is that if EPA would finally list PFAS as a class of hazardous chemicals. That really facilitates all kinds of regulation and cleanup and everything else. And that does not follow the same requirements as you have related to the Safe Drinking Water Act, which takes years to get any kind of regulation through. And EPA currently has, for example, a lifetime health advisory, which when the head of the Office of Water called me in 2016 to tell me what they were setting it at, which was 70, and it was the sum of PFOA and PFOS, he said, I know you're not going to think this is good enough. I said, whoa, I'm a pragmatist. This is better than where we were. You know, this is an improvement from 400 parts per trillion, but no, it's not where we need to go. And some of the newer data that has been produced, and there's been a tremendous amount in the past 4 years, really would lower that level more in the neighborhood for a sum of 3 or 4 PFAS to about 3 or 4 parts per trillion, in part based upon the human, the immune suppression, where children who are exposed early in life have more difficulty mounting a normal response to vaccination. I think we should all be thinking COVID vaccination there. I think also the understandings, for example, that have come from my NTP released the results of a 2-year cancer bioassay in rats with PFOA, where very, very low doses cause pancreatic tumors in the animals. And California EPA has used that information to actually calculate a maximum contaminant level of 0.1 parts per trillion. That's not going to be enforceable. So they're talking about actually notifying all consumers if their water exceeds about 10 parts per trillion. But the Europeans have gone ahead, and their EFSA, which is their food safety agency, the Environmental Food Safety Agency, has come up with a acceptable daily intake, which would equate to a drinking water level of about 3 parts per trillion. So is EPA going to move ahead with all of this? I don't know. I should mention that FDA has actually reached an agreement with manufacturers to remove some of the egregious PFAS from food packaging, but not everything.
Okay, another question for you, Dr. Birnbaum. What role could education play in galvanized demand for regulatory demand?
I think, as I said, knowledge is power. And unfortunately, in our country, the level of science literacy is very, very low. But the opportunities we have by involving citizens and communities in the activities is a way for them to become educated and therefore powerful related to what they're learning about these compounds. So I do think that the more media that can shine a light on the problem of PFAS. And I do want to mention that there's not one PFAS or two PFAS or four. There are over 9,000 PFAS, unique PFAS structures that have been synthesized by industry. And we know that there are thousands of them out there all the time, and some are not even intentionally synthesized. So we have to begin to look at PFAS as a class and as a total, and not try to think about regulating them one at a time.
Okay, we got one more question for you.
Okay.
How do you think the current Supreme Court may respond to environmental problems, and what, if anything, can be done if that response is not expected to be ideal?
I'm very hesitant to predict what the 6-3 Supreme Court is going to do, conservative. There are many conservatives who care deeply about their environment. There are many conservatives who believe that climate change is a real problem and that we have to begin to address it. So it's hard to predict. I think that we all know that if the Supreme Court rules against something, that basically throws it back to the legislature to make changes. These are some of the reasons that sometimes the marketplace and citizen pressure can be more effective more quickly. And one thing I forgot to mention, which I think is very important, is that all of us in this country have to say thank you to Maine and Massachusetts and Michigan and especially California and Oregon and Wisconsin and a number of other states that are moving ahead and creating regulations that have an impact. So the whole reason we had lots of flame retardants in consumer products was because California passed a rule, TB 117 in the 1970s, that said you got to have chemical flame retardants. And a couple of years ago, the Green Science Policy Institute and Arlene Bloom were successful about getting that regulation removed. And basically, if a company can't sell something in California, which is about the 6th biggest economy in the world, they're not going to make it that way. So we really do depend upon, we at the national level depend upon the states at this point to lead the pack.
Thank you so much for answering those additional questions. We really appreciate it.
Great.
And now Defend Our Health Executive Director, Mike Beliveau, will close us out. I so much enjoyed being with you this evening. Mike?
Thanks, Vivien. Your reporting this year has been so excellent, and you're such a powerful storyteller. We appreciate you leading us this evening. And to two of my favorite doctors, Linda and Leo, you're true environmental health heroes. And it's an honor to be working with you to end the silent epidemic of toxic chemical exposure. I'm also so proud of our staff and board teams. Without all of you, we wouldn't be able to make any headway whatsoever. And to all of our guests, whether you're joining us for the first time tonight or have been with us for 2 decades, thank you for joining the fight, because this is a fight and the stakes are high. We're up against big oil. We're up against the toxic chemical industry that puts profits before people. We're up against forces that are opposed to good government. So there's a lot of work to do here. And, we together with you, we can end the chemical crisis. With you, we can make sure that every single person has equal access to safe food and drinking water, to healthy homes, to toxic-free and climate-friendly products. With you, we can prevent disease, disabilities, and early death. Together, we can improve and achieve environmental health and justice and end the climate crisis. We're an effective organization because we're driven by strategy and we focused on solutions, but importantly and critically, we're powered by people. So we need you. We need your activism. We need your support. Continue to join us, and together we will defend our health. So thank you all, and have a good evening. I appreciate you being here.
my dog, sorry.